We want to talk a bit about the relations between men and women right now. You once expressed that we don't have the rules right between men and women to successfully work together on the workplace. And we were wondering, what do you mean by these rules? Do you mean social rules, or do you mean like legal policies, or what do you mean by saying this?
I mean all of those things. I mean day-to-day. There's conflicts that we don't know how to resolve exactly. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you put people together in a workplace, they're obviously going to be concentrating on their work, but they're also going to be people. And people are sexual beings, for example. And so we don't know how to properly balance the inevitability of sexual interactions between people in the workplace and the demands for propriety and efficiency. And so that causes a lot of trouble. So I know NBC now, I think, has a no hugging rule, for example, which seems a little heavy-handed to me. Perhaps it's necessary, but we don't exactly know what is necessary because we don't know how to precisely articulate the boundaries that constitute acceptable behavior. And so, and the reason for that is that men and women have only been working in hierarchical workplaces of extreme complexity together at the level that we experience now for a very short number of decades, and it's not surprising that it's taking us a while to work out the bugs.
Yeah.
So,
and what would you define as the concrete problems that then arise right now?
Well, part of the problems are, for example, how you define unacceptable sexual behavior. And so, for example, the National Academy of Science just released a report to dignify it with the name of report, in my estimation, that indicates that 50% of women in STEM fields experience sexual harassment in a given year, whereas the corresponding figure for one of the latest studies that was done by the Australian government is 0.08%. Well, that's a big difference. And the difference stems, at least in part, as a consequence of definition. And the problem with something like sexual harassment, which isn't a scientific category, right? It's not a proper set. It doesn't have defined inclusion and exclusion boundaries, like all triangles, for example. So the borders of the concept are very fuzzy, and they're partly socio-cultural in nature, and you can twist and bend them in one direction or another to suit your purposes, which is clearly, in my estimation, what happened with the National Academy of Science report. Well, their recommendations are that we restructure the STEM fields so that they're, for example, less hierarchical, because hierarchical structures are obviously what are driving sexual misbehavior on the part of men in the STEM fields. All of those propositions are completely, they may be true, but they're completely unfounded. There's no evidence that they're true, and there's certainly no evidence that restructuring these enterprises by modifying their hierarchical structure is going to produce the desired end, especially when you can't get the initial measurements right to begin with. We don't know the rules. So what are the rules? No relationships that are sexual in the workplace. Is that going to be the rule? Well, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean no flirtatious behavior? Does that mean no jokes? Like, what does it mean? Does it mean no long glances? Because there are corporate policies in the United States that are already regulating the amount of time that you can look at each other, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know what to do about this. Now, generally what you do is try to comport yourself like a reasonable and decent human being, which is a mode of being that's so complex that it can't be articulated fully in dogmatic legalization, right? You can't make a policy of reasonable behavior. I don't know, the document would be 500 feet thick because it would have to cover every possible eventuality.
But is there a way then to make those rules better? Is there a solution to the problem? Because of course, like the example you named with limiting the amount of time looking into somebody's eyes is quite bizarre. But is there something we can do together to achieve a better situation on the workplace?
Well, I would say, I wouldn't conceptualize the solution at that level of the problem. I mean, what I'm trying to do is to encourage people to be more responsible individuals. And I think if the workplace was populated by more responsible individuals, then many of these problems would go away. So, but that's a rather low resolution a solution to that particular problem, but I don't see a better one at the moment. So, don't comport yourself in a reprehensible manner. What does that mean? A lot of the misbehavior that people object to is driven by such things as excess alcohol consumption. So one of the things you might recommend if you're in the workplace and you want to be careful is, be careful. 1 drink with dinner with colleagues might be plenty. 10 might be pushing your luck. Now, I'm a little loath to say that because I also know that people need to blow off steam and they need to have some fun. But it's dangerous, and the borders will be pushed, and there will be consequences to that. And so we don't know exactly what to do about that. So, do you have to be more careful in a mixed gender setting than you have to be in a single gender setting? It seems to me that the accumulating evidence suggests that you do have to be more careful. And that's a problem in and of itself, because one of the things that we're striving for is equality of treatment in the workplace. And I don't know how you get equality of treatment in the workplace if you also have to be more careful in mixed gender settings. Maybe it's possible, but I don't know how it's possible. But again, it's not that surprising because we've only been at this for a short number of decades, and these are very complicated problems.
So maybe time will tell, too.
Yes, and the other thing too is that many occupations are sorting themselves out spontaneously by gender, and we also don't know what the consequences of that is going to be. That's happening at an accelerating rate. So, and no one knows the social consequences of that. I mean, one of the interesting consequences of that is that, for example, in the universities, the majority of the female-dominated disciplines are politically correct. So that's interesting as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not sure why it's the case, but it's definitely something that has social ramifications. And
we will also talk about that later in the interview.
Okay.